Welcome to Weekly Wins and Losses. My name is James Hepner, former real estate entrepreneur turned self-development hacker, coach, and fulfillment strategist. Each week, we bring you a thought to wrestle with that'll help you live fully alive and gain more life. Real life is made up of both wins and losses. Both were designed for your good. That's basic reality. Without facing and learning how to embrace your losses for greater gain, you miss out. You leave 50% of your life experience on the table. So with that, let's begin the show. When I originally thought to begin this podcast, I never honestly thought that I'd have this many people listening. Frankly, I'm blown away and thank you so much for it. Now, there's a couple of things I just wanted to share, and that is many of you have been reaching out to inquire about working with me, and the questions all seem to stem and follow a similar pattern. So I wanted to make your understanding of what that could look like just a little easier for you to actually understand. Let me tell you just a little bit about my actual business. I do live events like retreats and keynote speaking. I do group and one-on-one coaching. I also host a no-charge Friday noon virtual weekly wins and losses global video call. Now, I have to say, there is a difference between the one-on-one strategic results coaching experience and the live group work like our virtual weekly wins and losses global call. The one-on-one strategic results coaching goes super deep, as you can imagine. And this is for those that are deeply hungry for that intimate, ultimate, personal, transformational experience. Because it's just you and I, we get to get beneath the surface of your individual experience of life, align with your strengths, and from that place, sculpt, craft, and design a personal, successful, and fulfillment formula that is unique for you. Again, this is for those that are hungry and want it all. The virtual weekly wins and losses global call is quite the experience for everyone. Frankly, it's one of the better ways, if not the best way, to bring raw truth to what your last week is really all about. It's no charge and happens every Friday at noon. Jumping onto this simple call will deliver a profound experience for you as you clear the deck of all the unhelpful stings of the last week's losses so that when your new week begins, you're best able to launch out of the gate invigorated and ready to take bold, courageous action forward without the unhelpful side of hesitation and delay. I invite each one of you to show up and share as you wish, or simply observe others share a personal win and personal loss that stood out for them from the past week. Come and master the art of being prepared for anything, win, lose, or draw. Come and learn how to authentically celebrate both a win and a loss in real time, every time. So, for live events, keynote speaking, group, and one-on-one strategic results coaching, simply go to www.jameshepner.com. For the no-charge virtual weekly wins and losses global call happening every Friday at noon, simply go to www.weeklywinsandlosses.com. Then click on the link halfway down the page that says join this Friday call. So now, please sit back and enjoy this free information. I challenge you to engage with it. I sincerely hope it brings you value, stirs you to the needed new perspective, and maybe even brings an important question to the surface. A question that will help clarify your next move forward. May this episode number 24, Real Couples, Real Stories, Part 1, change your everyday life. Welcome, friends. Today we have some new people on the call. You may recognize one of them. She's going to be my little co-host today, and we're coming to you from very different locations. I am all of about 8 feet below where she's at. So yes, we are still together and it will probably make these people below us smile because they're relationship people. So today I want to introduce you to Dr. Ray and Jean. Dr. Ray and Jean, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Welcome. Meg, welcome to the show. I can't wait to co-host with you. It's always interesting to see what you're going to come up with.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. I just was like, when you said, oh, I'm going to have like these people on and they love relationships and they're all about it. I'm like, could I please be on too?
Well, there you go. So you and I, we get to be on this little talk together. And let me just say it this way. Dr. Jean and Ray are a power couple and relationship experts.
When it comes to relationships, they believe they cannot teach it unless they live it. Amen to that one. For over 20 years, they have helped thousands of couples create the relationship of their dreams with a partner they fell in love with. They are co-hosts of their own podcast called Couple Synergy, Real Couples, Real Stories, Real Relationships, and co-authored a book entitled Good Boundaries, Great Relationships. Now that is a heartful. Good job.
He's the doctor. He's the doctor, though. I'm not a doctor. I only have a master's.
There you go.
Well, yeah. Only
just to correct it. I don't want to false advertise.
Well, and so you just schooled me there for a second, because one of the things that I do know about the two of you is Dr. Ray and Jean, you both have masters in clinical psychology. However, Dr. Ray, you have an additional doctorate in clinical psychology. So I guess that's what makes you the official doctor.
That's correct, I guess. Papers.
Oh, don't we love the labels that get put on us, right? That are meant to say so much.
Yeah.
I got a little thought for you, and I was debating. I know when you and I, or the three of us, got to know each other, and by the way, three of us, what I'm referencing is Meg was initially outside of this. So now she's been brought in. So Meg, this is something that you now get to play with, and we get to ask these people some wonderful questions. So I've been prepping, and I've been thinking, listen, if I'd really pepper them and poke them with some difficult questions, what would it be? And I came up with about 5. However, what I did is I decided to scrap them all and just go with whatever it is right here. So one of the things that I wanted to know is, what had you make the decision, if I think about it, to shift from clinical psychology to coaching? Like, that's a fascinating play. It doesn't happen all day long. Typically people like, I'm a coach and then I'm going to be more professional. In some way, you guys did the opposite. What had you do that?
So most people don't know that traditional marriage counseling has the worst success rate across the board of all therapies. In fact, traditional marriage counseling can, if not done correctly, appropriately, can actually lead to divorce and cause more factors, that can cause divorce in couples. And so also most people don't know that majority of therapists out there, there's no specialty when it comes to marriage counseling, or no specific licensure except for marriage and family counseling, which is a specific kind of licensure. But any therapist out there can call themselves a marriage counselor, and they don't have to have any specific training in order to do that. And so because of that, that the field being the way that it is, and it being very limited in the way that we're able to help couples, we felt that going into the coaching realm actually frees us up, gives us a lot more room to be able to help couples and transform their relationships. In addition to that, marriage counseling and the counseling field really focuses on pathology, when coaching is really about evolution, right? It's about taking where you're at now and getting to where you want to go.
We also have been sitting in front of couples for 20 years, and we wanted to reach a bigger audience. So we're in the process of writing another book, and we want to do more public speaking. And the information that we have learned along the way and the method that we use to work with couples, it's so fascinating to watch couples shift really quickly, as opposed to years and years of therapy that you're sort of trying to discover that, which is certainly where we started when we first started working with couples. But now we can work with people for about 90 days. And within the first 6 weeks, we see huge shifts, which is really awesome. And so it isn't really a traditional marriage counseling where you're just sitting there refereeing people. We're teaching.
I think that's beautiful. And I'm curious if I'm getting this right. I always say that therapy, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I would love to, know the information better if I'm getting it wrong. But I always say therapy focuses on why, which to me is a great exploration. It's, go back in there and go, why am I the way that I am? Like, it's wonderful for awareness. It's wonderful for understanding, et cetera, et cetera. But coaching focuses on what's next. what's next and how. And that's, I think, that sort of that key that you need to move it forward. Otherwise, you can get caught in the why. And in my own life experience, the longer I stick with the why, the more answers I get, right? Like if I say, why am I the way I am? I'm like, well, in grade 3, so-and-so did that to me. And when my parents did this to me and my brothers, whatever. And I can come up with more and more answers to answer that question. But once I go with what and how, that needs clarity and movement and traction. Would you say that that's correct, or would you have a different take on that?
Yeah, I would definitely say that's correct. I would say coaching is actually not just the what, but also the why. We need to understand where we came from. We need to understand how we got to where we're at. And then what am I going to do with that? Right?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with the knowledge that I have now? And how am I going to shift where I'm at to where I want to go?
I think the why is important because we learn stuff so early in life. Our first relationship is parent-child, and we don't really realize the whole school of people that have taught us, our grandparents, our aunts and uncles, society. And then when you learn that, you're like, oh, this is something I learned. This isn't really who I am. And so if it's something I learned, I can learn something new. And we get so automatic with what we've learned. We're so fast to form a habit, and people don't realize that's just what they're doing is a habit. And then when they learn something new, they can do something new. And it feels that idea of developing rather than the pathology.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So interesting, because sometimes I have to remind myself of this when James and I are in an argument or where we're having some kind of disagreement or whatever. I'm like,
You don't have those.
I know, right? Yeah.
Neither do we.
We're that couple
Friction.
that never argues.
Hey, baby, listen. Friction is where it's at. If without friction, you got
good.
no love. It's just good stuff, though, right, Meg?
Exactly.
I'm just checking you.
Just good. Just good. But I have to remind myself, it's my primary personality fighting with his primary personality. It's not true essence fighting with true essence. And if I can somehow find my way back to my observer, if I can somehow find my way back to my higher self, I can all of a sudden look at everything completely differently. And just that shift of going like, okay, I don't need to take this as personally as I am, because it's my ego that's hurt. It's not that I'm really hurt. It's that my ego is massively offended. If I can get past that, all of a sudden, it's amazing to me how, and I say this a little bit tongue in cheek, but a little bit really too, there are no problems. It's just experiences to have. But the path to getting out of your primary personality is so difficult. And I'm curious, is that one of the things that you would consider foundational, or is that something that you take a lot of time teaching people, or where does that kind of fall into your work?
So, you know what? One of the things that we educate people in right off the bat is our brain. So our hindbrain, our reptilian brain, which is just very reactive and only is concerned about safety, right? And so that's where we fight from. We fight from this reactive place that somewhere we feel threatened. And the other thing we know is it's this much is happening right now. But when you have an emotion, you feel all your life experiences of those emotions. We call that an iceberg, the 15% above the water, but you're feeling the 100%. And so it is your partner that's always going to step on your iceberg. It's a beautiful thing that happens. Somehow we magically find someone who knows our dance, right? and your icebergs will bump into each other at the same time. And the other part of our brain that is the limbic system, the part of our emotional brain, has no relationship to time. And so we can't resolve those things. And really what we teach people is actually how to heal the past through your relationship now. Because if there's no emotional first aid applied to an event that happened when you were 6, it's just sitting there. And that's what's reacting. And then as you learn to do that, you have to get yourself into a calmer place to be able to access that. And like you said, not taking it personally is huge and hard because it seems personal. It hurts personally. It's just not personal. It's reactive from older stuff. And so once people learn how to do that, then they can work through all sorts of stuff and they understand how we operate as human beings.
We call those
Yeah.
emotional echoes, and it's inevitable in every relationship where these echoes from the past are going to play out in our relationship. And our partner is going to bring that up in us. And that's typically where conflicts are coming from. It's not about the dishes or the laundry. It's really about what that is bringing up within each person. Anytime your partner has an intense emotional reaction to something you said or did, it is one of those emotional echoes that are coming to the forefront. And couples are challenged to learn what these echoes are in their partner, and then also apply that first aid that Jean is talking about, and able to heal these old wounds and move on and evolve into those next stages of the relationship.
So for those of you that are watching this, you'll see that their brand, their logo is Couples Synergy. And one of the things that just came up for me, you talk about safety. And I think at the base note of who we all are, well, I wonder if we know who we are, because society says we should focus on thriving. Surviving, the safety part of it, just get beyond it, you weakling, apparently, right? But yet when I hear what you guys are talking about, you're saying at the core, and I love this, at the core, the message that we have is that safety is ultimately what we're all looking for. Without safety, we're not taking a step forward. We just won't, no matter what it is. So how, I'm just genuinely curious, how in your relationship, when you look at when times get difficult, some would say problematic, but let's be honest, it's an invitation for more. Friction offers us an invitation to explore. How do you recognize that what the other person's looking for is exactly what you're looking for? And maybe through, and you perhaps answered some of this, you talk about emotional echoes, but how do you address that within your relationship? And what are the primary components of what you're doing that you can teach when I say teach, be there and support other people in their primary or in their actual distinct place in their relationship?
It's interesting. I was working with a client the other day, and she was talking about how her husband went the wrong way on a one-way street, and it really activated her. And she didn't really know how to respond to it. So she sort of freezes and locks up, and then has like passive aggressive comments. And what she was uncovering is that when she was 13 or 14 years old, her parents said, "We're going on vacation," but they moved her to the United States and never told her. So when she does it, when people don't follow the rules, it makes her really anxious. It makes her reactive brain happen. Well, her husband, he has a big issue with being told what to do. So now their stuff's bumping together, right? And so when you understand that her reaction is really coming from this old wound, and he knows that, well, now he can have compassion for that. And if she knows he's been controlled and told what to do his whole life, she can have compassion for that. And it really is that part of understanding ourselves and where that comes from. That's how we don't take it personally, when we understand that this stuff happened before we ever met. And then once you're more careful with each other, that's where the safety comes into place. So whenever you're having an emotional reaction, or your partners, you could say, "What did you just hear me say?" And they'll have the telephone game going on, and they heard something completely different. And so that clarity is really important.
Yeah, one of the things we teach couples is how the brain reacts to emotional stimuli. If you are listening to your partner talking about you, it activates the emotional brain. And so when you are listening to whatever they're saying, it's going into your, hippocampus. Hippocampus is short-term memory producing part of the brain. It's packaging it in a different order. It's packaging it in the order of most emotionally charging items first, and then in descending order. So when you are in a fight or tensions are high, that emotional brain is activated. Your brain's picking out certain words that really bring up emotion in you, and it's all out of context. And that's why communication completely breaks down when tensions are high. And so one of the things we teach couples is how to slow that down, right? How to actually have that communication where you are mirroring back and listening, truly listening to what your partner is saying.
I love that. And it's, Jean, because if you when you told that story to me, I immediately went into a story that James and I had. So I grew up, I mean, my parents were lovely, wonderful, amazing people who I treasure so dearly. But my dad was an alcoholic growing up, and he was in the 80s and early 90s. And so he would drive drunk all the time. And so anytime there's weaving, anytime there's massive amounts of speed in a vehicle, I just sort of start to get like really, really anxious. And James grew up on a farm and has been driving since the day he came out of the womb. So he can drive and like he has no problems. Like he often goes like, doing like race car stuff. I don't know what that's called, like NASCAR or whatever race car stuff that is. He goes, I would love that. So when he drives, you can imagine to him, every road is a race. And to me, every road is a death trap. And so when we first got together, what you were talking about was exactly us. I would be sitting there white knuckled. Why do you have to drive so fast? And he would be going, don't tell me what to do, baby. Like I'm a free man. And so that for us was one of those areas where we had to like hear each other. And James is so sweet. Now he's always like, we have a 17-year-old son who's learning how to drive. And so it's cute because as he's learning or teaching our son how to drive, he's like, well, you have to remember to be safe and you have to think about your passengers. And like, you can hear the work that we've done come out through how he's teaching our son. And it's just so adorable. But what you're talking about, and this is the part that I'm really just fascinated by, is you have to hear each other, be willing, and you have to mirror, like you were saying, like, what did you hear me say? When you're both triggered, that's extremely difficult. Mm-hmm. So how do you find a way back to safety or calm when you're both triggered, and then it becomes a war of who's right? I'd be curious on how do you break that cycle?
So if you don't mind, just before you answer that, I'm really curious about that as well. The one thing, Meg, you talk about the safety of driving. What's fascinating is, and Meg, I don't know if you know this, but when I think safety, and I'm sure you've picked up on this, but I reckon that, so when Meg drives and I'm sitting beside Meg, for her safe is if she's driving about the average speed of what's happening around her, or some cars pass her and she feels safe that way. To me, I feel most safe when cars, I see them in my rearview mirror and then they're gone. Like I actually feel safe, not because I'm dominating and desiring to control. I just feel very safe there. So one thing when it comes to safety that I've become very in tune with is everyone has a different variety of what safety looks like for them. And so to tune into that, but Meg, please ask that question again, because I totally botched that great ask.
No, I think you're good. And I'm sure you've heard my question a million times. So please go ahead.
Yeah, there was a study done of 2,000 couples, I believe. And they rated their relationship as happy, healthy, or unhappy, unhealthy. And they were trying to determine if there was a difference between happy, healthy couples and unhappy, unhealthy couples in the way they fight. And they found in the study that there was no difference. Wow. Happy, healthy couples, they said mean things, they slammed doors, they called each other names. The only difference they were able to find was that happy, healthy couples came back after the fact and made repair attempts. They made these attempts to try to reconnect, say, I'm sorry for what I said, I'm sorry for what I did, I want to do things different. And that's really the key component here. It's not to eliminate conflict. You can't. Conflict is inevitable in every relationship, right? I say that it's like the credit card bill. It's always due. Your choice is either you pay it now or you pay it later with interest. So, it's the fact of the matter is that couples need to understand their conflict. And too often what happens is that they blow up, they get triggered, they say these mean things, and then they sweep it under the carpet. And then they repeat that cycle over and over and over again, right? So it's about really evolving your conflict, right? Getting to those iceberg issues that keep bumping up to each other, the triggers, start to understand your partner at a different level of vulnerability. And heal that and move on to the next one, right? Because there's going to be a next one.
We like to think about health, not like an absence of disease, but sort of like a stress test. right? So when you take a stress test, they don't care how fast you go or how far you go. What they care about is how quickly can you recover. And so that's what we want people to do, is to shorten that recovery time. But it's at least 20 minutes before those stress hormones even begin to start to relax. So you need a chunk of time to calm down. And then you need some good self-talk. This person loves me, they're hurting, I'm hurting, how do we get back there? Because when we're in those secondary emotions of anger and frustration and anxiety and worry, it's very difficult to, reach out to your partner and be like, hey, would you like some coffee? Let's have a nice conversation. Because you're like, ah. And in that moment, they're a monster to you. They're just, you're the one who's hurting me, and so you calm yourself down. And I mean, we used to take days to calm down, and we would have to sit in front of a couple and work together. Yeah. So we got really good at separating those things out.
So for the listeners that don't know, we had a scheduled podcast time, and they had, doesn't make a difference, but somehow we got the Zoom links mixed up. Here, I thought we got it mixed up. What we're realizing, folks, is they were just working out their stuff. This is what was going on.
Or it was us working out our stuff. We're like, we can't sit in front of these people while we're angry. That, you know what, honestly, like how much respect I have for that. Like that's extremely difficult to be like, there's a part of me that just wants to throttle you, but I have to sit down and work with you and have that emotional maturity to go like, yes, I'm mad. And that's still true, but I respect you enough to go, we're going to sit down and we're going to do this work together. I think that's huge. And I always tell myself, and I'd be curious if you think this is healthy or unhealthy, whatever. I always tell myself right after a fight, when my mind is just going, oh, like, do I have a story for you? This guy. And then, woof, my brain goes. I always remind myself, that's my venting story. That's not the real story. Like, give myself a few minutes to do the venting story. Like, that's the biggest jerk. And how did I ever? And why would I? And, my life would be so much better if. And if I give myself a few minutes, fine. It's like blowing off steam. It's like opening up a pop bottle and letting out the, whatever the pressure. But as quickly as I can, I need to come back to the real story, which is he's my teacher, because this is part of the spiritual journey. And every time I think I see an enemy, I actually see a teacher, and to be grateful, for this opportunity to go inward. But sometimes it takes me a while, and I'm curious, is it okay to take like a couple of minutes to go like, ah?
So here's how
try not to have any venting story.
So here's how I'm going to prime these experts. I've talked to them, but I've been waiting for this intervention. This is beautiful. So give her the answer that that I would prefer.
Set my wife straight.
So in our energy field, the way that our anatomy is, we have these different layers, and they're structured and unstructured, the same as our body. We have skin, we have blood, we have bone marrow. So in our second layer is our emotions of ourself, and they are like air. And in the fourth layer, it's our emotions about everybody else, and those are like water. And in between is our mind, our thinking. And so when we have uncomfortable emotions, we try to slow them down, and they get stagnant. And what they do is that momentum has to go somewhere, because the nature of energy is movement. So it goes into here, and you get mental activity. And that's exactly what you're describing. And it's because you're not really letting your feelings totally flow. And so, yeah, you have to run through the course, right? You have to, whatever your story is, and then you go, okay, that's not really the truth. And then keep going into, the question I like to ask myself is, what is it about me that's choosing to hang around with someone like him if I'm having all those kind of thoughts?
So great.
Beautiful.
Like, it reminds me, that question reminds me of the question or the work of Byron Katie, right? I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Katie, but she's immediately like, if you think that about this person, what is it about you, right, that saw that? Oh, it's the part that's the same. That's why you recognized it. So I love that. That's really beautiful.
One of the things that brings up for you, or for myself here, Jean, when you talk about those things is, and this is tongue in cheek. So listeners, just hang on to this one, because I love this woman dearly. I've been with her for 27 years. That's a fact. She's crazy. That's for sure. Okay.
No
And
denying
it brings out so much life in me. It's like my shoulders have to get wider every time she's around, because I got to hold a whole bunch of chaos, which is beautiful. I love it. Right. And so I like to consider myself as like a grounded, somebody that she can ground into. And I got a lot of work left because she keeps challenging me more. Stress testing, a woman does this proficiently. This is what a woman does, right? And this is the beauty of her. One of the things that comes up for me when she just goes on a rant, I'll just call it rant, Meg, whatever, if that's a beautiful term, I sure hope. But anyway, she unloads. The first thing I think about is divorce, but not in the proverbial sense divorce. I think divorce as in like, how can I divorce myself of the story that she's actually saying to me? Because I know this isn't really what she thinks. It's a version, and I can't just say it means nothing. I need to, what I do in that moment is I say, this is important for her, or else she wouldn't be in this space. She's hearing some echoes, perhaps like you folks say. And one of the things that I love about you folks is when I first got to know you, one of the things that you mentioned is that we as humans have forgotten that we're meant to do tough things, you know, and we talked about things like great opportunities, divorce, one of them, sexuality, another one, trauma and recovery, another one. Describe, why are these three great opportunities? So Meg, yes, I do think about divorcing you all the time, but I'm with you forever. But divorcing this story, or
That's
even
hilarious.
this, divorcing
I love
how I think I'd like it to go. Because I've realized when somebody is being a certain way, there's an opportunity for a new creation happening here. So instead of me saying I have a projected outcome, I release and I do my best. But anyway, back to the question. Why are these great opportunities? Divorce, sexuality, and trauma and recovery.
So I think, Meg, you had said earlier that there are no problems, right? There are things to learn, right? We believe the same thing. There's no right or wrong. You know, whatever choice you make, you're going to learn from it, or you at least have the potential and opportunity to learn from it, right? And humans are designed to go through trauma. We just are. You know, we're not meant to, you know, sit on a couch forever and have everything given to us and handed to us. We are designed to go through challenging things, and that's how we grow. You know, the human body evolves every single minute. And so each of us have to evolve, not just physically, but mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And each relationship has to evolve as well. And so that takes growth. It takes challenge in order to grow as well.
We are always dealing with two things simultaneously, two separate needs, right? We have a need for safety and we have a need for love, and those conflict with each other, right? We have a need for certainty. We have a need for variety. And when we're everything that has a beginning has an end. So if your relationship has a beginning, it's also going to have an end. And we're designed to, when we look at our partner, we start bonding, we connect, and we feel that. And the severance of that is very painful. And that's coming for all of us. And so in those moments when we are, you know, really taken down, that's when everything we thought has to be redone, you know. And so when you're in going through a divorce, you know, everything that you had thought for years about your future is suddenly completely gone, or a death. Our sexuality is the greatest opportunity we have to become bonded with another person. And if that is done with a lot of love and care, it is the most sacred thing we can do ever in this human body, of being, you know, the idea of the two shall become one. When you are with someone a very long period of time, your brains actually start to mirror each other, and you can't possibly hurt your partner without hurting yourself. And it's a really beautiful thing to to know that and be like that. But it takes time, takes a long time to really have that mirroring going on so that you do feel those ways. And, you know, if you fell down and cut your knee up, you have to get a little first aid, and you can't stop it from healing. We're just designed to heal, but our emotional wounds don't get that first aid typically. And so because that part of us has no relationship to time, they don't heal through time. Your brain keeps going, I need to protect myself from this. I need to protect myself from this. And so when we something that's traumatic and we get this opportunity with our partners to open that back up again, and now I can apply emotional first aid to something that happened to him maybe 30 years ago, because there's no relationship to time. And that's the real beauty of everything. And when you heal that stuff, it's really amazing, because you go, I know why I went through that now. I have resilience. I have tolerance. I'm able to heal. I'm not afraid of that anymore. And there's something that they know, that people who are happy people, they have this thing in common. And the thing that they have in common is taking risks. Well, if you're going to take a risk, you might be disappointed. Something might happen that you don't like, but it's better than not knowing and staying in this smaller place.
Yeah. You know, it's such an interesting thing that you're talking about, because it reminds me
Meg,
of,
just pause. By the way,
yeah.
this is what she does for me all the time. She says, it's such an interesting thing. And I lean in and I think, what's going to happen now? So
Well, what you just said was interesting.
It was. What was interesting is I also had a question, but I'm listening to you. No, I want to hear your question. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. This is really good. Actually, this is really good, because this actually takes us exactly where I was going to go. So this is perfect example right here. Okay. So
that's
here's
right.
the
Make it better, Meg.
thing.
Make it a better question.
No, I'm serious. This is really, really great, because one of the things, like one of my emotional wounds when I was a child, was my parents are so lovely, like I said, but they're immigrants and had lots and lots of needs, and they assumed their to meet their needs, right? Like we were supposed to help out with everything. We were, whatever. And so we were sort of we weren't allowed to have needs as children. We were more the need filler. And so I grew up thinking, in any room that I am, and with whichever person I am with, that person's needs are automatically more important than mine. And whatever's going on in the room, whatever needs I can meet for other people is my value. So if I can meet someone else's needs, I'm valuable, and I'm never allowed to have needs, because if I'm with someone, their needs are automatically more important than mine. And so that was a wound for me. And then I married James, or I met James, and James was like, he took one look at me and went, maybe you saw I was a little wounded bird, and you were like, oh, I'm going to take care of her. Like, I shall meet her needs. And he spoke up, and he was like always this guy who would like, what do you want, babe? What do you want? Right. And he would take care of me and would always speak up for me. And I loved it. And it was so amazing until we had been married for about 2 years. And then I went, can you never just leave something alone? Like, your needs are so big. Like, just stop talking for a minute, And I began to resent his gift because I couldn't take it for my own. So what I had denied in myself, I now resented in him. Instead of saying, oh, you're my teacher and you have a gift for me, I went, oh, now you're just one of those people that I have to serve. Somehow I managed to flip it for myself. And James, I always say James was a feminist before I was, because he just kept on going like, you got to dig in and find what you want. You got to dig in and find what you want, to the point now where I can speak up and I can like share my needs and I validate my needs, which is why I went on with my question, even though I knew you had a question, because
job,
you did this to me, babe.
Hey, I'm all good.
You made this possible. But like, to me, what you're talking about, it has felt like my lived experience up until this point. Obviously, I'll go deeper. But I think like that idea of when we're with a partner and we go like, you are my healing agent, that's a different way of seeing someone. And if you go, this conflict we're having is actually could at least potentially be my healing agent. You begin to look for the lessons and all of that, which switches the entire argument, right? Because even now, when James and I will argue, sometimes he'll say to me, "I'm not your dad." And I'll say, "Don't say that." And in my head, I'm going, "That's right, actually, he's not." And I'm yelling at him like he is. Anyway, I just wanted to kind of share that, because when you were talking about that, I'm like, I felt that. So sorry, James, please ask your question.
No, actually, I was so drawn into it. It's just, yeah, that was really nice. Thanks, Meg. So if I would just take everything that we've talked about thus far, and maybe even just what Meg was talking about, building into that, could you, and where do you currently struggle? And where does the concept of divorce, sexuality, and trauma recovery, like, could you look at any and each of these areas in, if you'd be really honest, in your personal relationship? Like, where do you struggle? And how do you allow divorce, sexuality, and trauma recovery? How do you let those three things speak to you? Make it real.
So obviously, we can't teach it if we don't live it. And so we have talked in our podcast about a lot of the struggles that we've had in our own relationship. And in helping couples, we don't only draw from our education experience, but from our own personal experience. So we have had our own wounds that we have brought to this relationship. And, sexuality was in a huge area, for couples that they struggle in. And it's been an area for us too, as well. I've talked about in other podcasts about what I learned and paired with sexuality, was what the media and porn industry and, society really touts about what sexuality is, and that was something that I had to redefine within myself, and that also affected our relationship, and learning how to redefine that close bond that you could have with another human being. The closest connection you could have with another human being can only be achieved if you redefine those wounds that you are bringing into the relationship. Jean, when we met, she was a single mom. And so she had gone through a divorce. And, those were some of the wounds that you brought in. But I mean, maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, we both didn't learn really healthy things about relationships, and had come from bad relationships, and did a lot of work on ourselves. And for women, there's these stages that we go through, and it's different for men, because men are kind of the same from puberty on, whether they've had sex or not, whether they have a baby or not, they're the same, right? They don't change anything. For us, we change all the time. Like, not even every week is the same with our cycles and our hormones and all that kind of stuff. And so when we're in this phase of life where we're the innocent, right, before we get our periods, we're the innocent, which is where a lot of our wounds come from. And then we go into the phase of being the maiden. When we're in the maiden phase, we're like, pick me. We want to please everyone. We just want someone to accept us and love us or whatever. And then we go into the mother phase. And the mother phase is, it's not about me at all. But then when you get to a stage of life where you're going through menopause and stuff, you're in this queen phase, which says it's all about me. And when you talk about when you guys first met and you were this pleaser, and he helped you heal to a point where you started to grow. And then you said, wait a second, I don't want to do this anymore. And that's the really cool thing about relationships. We don't even know we're doing it, but we help each other become different. And then the catalyst that brought us together that we loved about someone drives us nuts. It's really crazy. And so when we talk about like really merging as human beings, all the junk in between us has to come up and out. Mm-hmm. We call it like forging, like you put metal in the fire and you get it all moving, and then you hammer it and you get all the molecules tighter. Well, all the impurities have to come out. And sadly, our sexuality is extremely perverted. When I was a kid, if you wanted something weird, you had to go into Chicago and find a movie theater, and you were a pervert, right? Well, now you can pick up your phone, you could sit in front of the TV with your children and you have people having sex right in front of your face all the time. And so that's one of the things that we realized that was really a barrier between us. And so if we're going to watch a movie, we'll look it up and we'll go, okay, we don't want to be exposed to the violence. We don't want to be exposed to the sexuality because it feels yucky. It feels yucky and it makes you shut down. It doesn't keep you open so you can be connected. And so that was, I would say, one of the biggest things that we worked through during the course of our relationship. That was a big deal. And it was stuff that it's become so normalized. And then you wonder, well, what's wrong with me? Mm. And it's a hijacking that happens. And I just remember there was one day and I was shifting hormonally, going through menopause. And I just got up. I said, I can't watch TV anymore. I can't have this in my face anymore. It feels terrible. And I think people have become so desensitized that they don't feel much and they need that shock. Well, that shock prevents you from love. That shock keeps you in the place of fight or flight. And so you can have sex from that place, but it is not love.
It's from a place of scarcity and fear.
Yeah.
Well, it's also just physical in that aspect. It's you're not able to reach that level of spirituality and that spiritual connection that you could have with another human being. We call it the inner sanctum. That in that space is only reserved for the couple, and their spirituality. And in that space, it is safe enough to be able to have your deepest, darkest secrets, your shadow side, as Carl Jung said, your shadow side come out, and have a partner be able to see that shadow side and still accept you, right? That shadow side we keep from the world. And, with good reason. We can't trust the world. Right. And outside of inner sanctum, that's where we have other relationships, where we may share things with, but not all of us, and in that inner sanctum, if you are bringing in just outside influences, even just friends, bringing friends into that inner sanctum, you violate that safety that is really necessary to get to that deepest level of connection.
The other thing that was really important for us, when I turned 50, I decided I was going to walk 1,000 miles right before I turned 50. So when I was 49, and it turned into this grand adventure. We ended up doing a 200-mile hike in the John Muir Trail over 20 days. And what happened there is we got away from all electronics for 20 days and natural light and natural sounds. And we became sensitive.
It's like detoxing.
We detoxed, and it was easy to walk into the mountains and into the forest. It was very difficult to come out. And one of our friends owns a pizza place in California. And that's where we went and stayed at his house, and we go into the place and the TVs are all over the place. And it was like, whoa, we don't have enough sensitivity. And you can't love without feeling, without being sensitive. So we spend a lot of time outdoors. We spend a lot of time in quiet with natural sounds, which is really healing to us because electronics move faster than a human being. So if you are in the garden and you're gardening and someone says to you, hey, come over here and check this out. You go check it out. You come back, everything you were doing is still there. But if you're watching a screen and someone says, hey, come check this out, you go back and like, what did I miss? And it creates all this anxiety in us. And I think that's why we have so much anxiety, especially our kids.
And sexless marriages.
A lot of sexless marriages.
Well,
Sorry,
go ahead. I'm listening. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I didn't want me to cut you off. It seems to me that at least this has been my experience with life. If you ever want to see what kind of partner you are, and I think, firstly, perhaps I'll ask, because I don't want to be framing something that isn't of what you think, but sometimes when I work with people, one way to see where they're really at is asking them the question, what's your sex life like? Would you agree with that? Just really simply? That's a good indicator.
It's a barometer.
There you go.
Yeah.
And so one of the things, exactly. So thanks for that. It doesn't say anything, but it kind of shows you the temperature. One of the things that I think about this, all of this conversation has drawn me, it draws me to the thinking of, and the awareness that if we rush through life, to your point, coming out of the woods is the most difficult. If we don't process and we enter the romance stage of the day, whatever that looks like, it can be the whole day. Why not? Like romance is that. Romancing life. Romancing is a process. Now we enter the bedroom and all of a sudden she reveals a shadow side. Love in and of itself is you give me something that maybe you don't want. I take what you don't want and I reflect back to you that I can love you, not in spite of this, but because of this. Like I love all of you. And then the one observing goes, you even love this about me? So think about the processing that is required for that true, and back to your sanctum, for that to happen and for the sacred space to be really safe. Right? Yeah.
And that doesn't come without a lot of work.
One of the things I thought about is the most toxic relationships, they have a lot of sex. There's so much volatility in those relationships. The only time they feel good is when they're having sex. And when they're not, they're abandoning each other and they're abusing each other and they feel terrible. And then they come back and have sex. So sometimes it's
right. And it's not about quantity. It's really about the quality of the connection, because, people who have really toxic relationships, it's physical, and people, when they are having sex, it's just, they're all in their own head instead of being in the relationship and being in that connection.
So relief seeking, very little responsibility seeking, right?
Right. Yeah. It's very
performance anxiety. Meg, sorry, you were going to say?
No, I find that so fascinating. And there was a question, but now I got distracted by this. You talking about what you see on a screen got me distracted because it took me back to, I watched, James is so cute. He likes to go to bed early and I like to go to bed late. So we're different that way. And so sometimes if he goes to bed on the weekend, he might go to bed a little bit early and I'll be like, stay up and watch a movie, whatever. And I watched the movie, a girl, depending on how late I like to stay up. But I watched this movie called, what was it called? The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo or something like that. It's a very popular movie. It won a bunch of awards, whatever. I'm like, yeah. It had a rape scene in it that I think I sat for 45 minutes and cried after. Like I could not get over it. And so when you were talking about it, it reminded me of, I think I thought about it for 2 weeks. Like it was just like right in the front of my brain. Like it was just constantly there. And I could not remove that energy from myself, having seen something so awful. And so when you were talking about how you bring that kind of into you, like it was just so clear to me, but that was because it was such a shocking scene. And then I had to ask myself, well, how many scenes have I seen that aren't maybe as shocking, but I bring with me, right? Or that shift my view of what things should be like. And so that was a fascinating thing. I'm really curious, in all the work that you do, is there a spirituality to it, a spiritual kind of component that you infuse it with, or what does that look like for you guys?
Every person I ever worked with, I asked them, why do you think we're here on earth? And what happens when we die?
Good question.
And that question determines how you get through difficult things in life. And there's really only two ways to answer it. One is, we're a fluke of something, nothing matters, we die, we're dead. Or we're on purpose, everything matters, when we die, there's more. And people on this side, if they don't have a belief in anything and nothing matters, they're not going to do any work. And people on the other side, now that's where you go to, you're my teacher. I'm an evolutionary being that is working towards something. And if you go back to, we're supposed to experience difficult things, tragedies and traumas, and those are the things that go, oh, I got to pay attention. I'm here. Somebody was talking about the war, and I was like, when people are at war, they are so alive because the past is gone and the future is uncertain. And you only have this moment. Can I eat today? Can I stay alive today? And in some ways, it's a really powerful way to be in the world.
So to answer your question about spirituality, we meet the clients where they're at.
Yeah.
Right. And it is important for couples to have a common spirituality, not necessarily religion, but common spirituality.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a question, and this might veer off just a tiny bit and then we can come right back. I don't know if you're familiar with Albert Camus at all and his absurdism, where everything is absurd, nothing has any meaning, therefore you can go forward and explore without the pressure because it doesn't mean anything, but instead of that being nihilistic, it's instead quite beautiful. Does that fall into one of those categories? And if you're not familiar with it, that's okay. I'm assuming kind of that you are, but if you're not, that's okay. But would it fall into one of the categories you were kind of talking about with that question?
With people not.
Yeah, like with people having that answer. Yeah, like either you believe you have meaning or you believe there is no meaning, right? That was sort of the question you were asking. And if I look at Albert Camus, he talks about how nothing has any meaning. And that's the good news, because with no meaning means you get to explore and expand and grow. And there's not this pressure to meet up with any way of being. Would that fall into a third category, or would that fall into one of the categories you had mentioned?
That actually he is finding meaning.
Yeah. And if people say nothing matters, but they don't live their life like nothing matters, then they're not in alignment with their belief. And so it's actually the same thing as everything matters. Nothing matters and everything matters is the same, right? Because then you have that freedom to explore and become. But if you say nothing matters, but I'm unhappy and I'm not going to find happiness, well, then you're not living in that alignment.
Right. I mean, you think of existentialism, someone believes that, once we die, we're gone, right? There's no existence. Well, someone can be nihilistic about that, right? And they can be like, well, then forget it. What's the purpose of living? Or someone can say to themselves, well, if every moment matters, because when I'm gone, I'm gone, that means that I have to live the moment to its fullest. Right.
Yeah. It's kind of like what you were talking about with the war, right? Only this moment matters. Well, then let's give it all to this moment. That's beautiful. I love that.
What strikes me is, when does it matter? Does it matter later? Does it matter right now? How am I deciding to show up right now? How am I deciding right now in this moment? This talk has been absolutely wonderful. We have talked about things that I think people talk about, and also action in life, things like divorce, sexuality. I think we get to see just where we're at in our relationship. And again, more sex isn't a better relationship, like you so eloquently said it. But it's kind of like it shows us how comfortable we are with being okay and actually loving the parts of the other that they have a difficult time loving about themselves. And trauma, recovery, well, that's real for everyone. Who doesn't have trauma happen on a daily basis? We inhale and we exhale. We take in life, and that actually births a whole bunch of traumas, just a breath. Oftentimes our brain seeks to give meaning. Our body doesn't lie. Our body says, why don't you just listen to me? I'm okay. I'm right here with it. And if we're not present, we just like to distract ourselves and go on the phone and can't process things. And all of a sudden we find ourselves going, holy smokes, that hike into the woods, that was fun. That 1,000 miles was such an amazing journey of reconnecting. My friends, I've really enjoyed this talk today. And I really want people to know where they can find you, because A, I like you. And B, you make me look good in front of my wife. And C, you really tell her what she should be doing properly for our relationship.
Oh, is that what this was?
It's a setup, Meg. It's a setup. No, seriously, where can people find you?
They can find us at couplesynergy.com. You can also find us on our Facebook page, Couple Synergy, and Instagram, Couple Synergy. But couplesynergy.com is the best place to get a hold of us.
Perhaps I'll have to do part Perhaps I'll have to do part 2 at some point in time. We'd love to have another chat with you.
You know what I was actually thinking? There's a line of thought that talks about sex is trauma. Even good sex is trauma. Like even sex that is the one stuff you want is trauma. And I'm like, oh, we didn't even get to that. I would love to have had a conversation about that. So part 2 sounds good.
Any one of you listening, when the man hears that the woman's still thinking about sex, he's going, yes. Sorry, I just had to throw that in.
Careful what you wish for.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome.
It was wonderful. Thanks again, ladies and gentlemen. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much
for having us.
Bye, everyone.
I sincerely hope you enjoyed that little interplay. Whether you choose me as your guide or not, that's simply great. Why do you ask? Well, because you've listened to the very end of this podcast. That means about one thing, and that's you've clearly made a decision to invest in yourself, and that's the good news. If you decide you need and want to, there's 4 things. Get unstuck by activating your creativity and inner resources. Number 2, see things clearly by learning how to lean into difficult situations so that you can discover life-changing gifts brilliantly disguised within each experience. Number 3, get to the next level. Or 4, live with vibrant energy and passion. Simply go to www.jameshepner.com, and that's for one-on-one coaching. Now, for the virtual Weekly Wins and Losses global call, go to www.weeklywinsandlosses.com for the no charge call. So again, I thank you for investing in yourself. See you next time. My sincere hope is that you've gleaned a few nuggets for yourself and a few pieces of interest that help you move forward in your unique journey. So again, I thank you for joining me here. This is James Hepner clocking out. Until next time, peace out, rock up.